Hi everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to the Book Refuge and welcome to this week's reading wrap up. I think we're at week 32. Haven't checked this, but yeah, 32 I think is what we're at, which is crazy. I can't believe it's August. That's bananas. At the beginning of this week's wrap up, we do have some new channel members to welcome, which I haven't had shout outs for that in a while. If you're interested, make sure you check out the link down below. I do have some wonderful benefits. I have 4 different levels. It's super awesome, especially since I'm going to be looking for am looking for a new job right now. There's a lot of uncertainty with that. So I don't pitch it hard usually because I figure if people want to be members, they'll find out. But we are approaching 10,000K, so I'm sure there's people who haven't heard about him yet. But we do have Danny Bailey to welcome to the channel. Danny, welcome. Thank you so much for your support. As well as Toth Ilona. I probably butchered that. It's in a language that I don't speak, so I apologize, but I'm so thankful for your support. It means so much to me. We're going to go ahead and dive into these. Sorry. First time talking today, so it's always when I film this video I'm like, what am I saying right now? I'm also trying using my microphone again, so you should let me know if the sound quality is better than it's been recently. I know that what can happen is there's a lot of rustling, but I decided to use it. I haven't used my microphone in a long time, so let me know with this one if that is better or not. We'll see. I was able to get through 15 books this week, which is great. Last week I only got through 10, which I know is a lot for some people, but for me, I usually read around 15, and so I was feeling kind of like what was happening, but we're okay. So the first one that I read was Virtuous by Marie Force. This was a viewer recommendation, so I will be doing a series where I go in depth about the viewer recommendation videos. I now have a viewer recommendation form. It's in my link tree down below. Find that link near the bottom of my description box. I already have almost 300 in there, so it's definitely intense, but I have found some amazing books through that recommendation form. We'll talk about more of them. But that being said, I won't go in too much depth about this one here because there will be a separate video coming out, because every 5 to 10 of those I read, I'll make a video about it. So this one though is between a elementary teacher and a movie star. Her dog forcibly introduces her to this movie star when they ruin a take on the set. And she has a lot of hurt in her past. And he is secretly part of a BDSM club that is like Hollywood's best kept secret. And so he doesn't want to push that on her. So I've only read the first one. I know this is supposed to be a series. There was no BDSM in the first one at all, which was a little disappointing because one of the tropes that was put in the trope part was that it was BDSM. I understand it will happen later in the series. As for this one, I wasn't super compelled by either of them. This book came out quite a few years ago, so I feel like it was more hot topic at the time it came out. So I did give this 3.5 stars. It was okay. Carnal Secrets by Suzanne Wright. This was book 3 in this series, which Feral Sins was one of the recommendations from the forum, and I've continued with this series. This one is between, this one is kind of like the mate was ignoring the mating bond, and so the heroine, she decided to leave the area then because it was too hard for her to see her potential mate, because that's what it is you kind of recognize your mate and it's still kind of up to you guys to do something about it, and he wasn't doing anything about it, and so she left. And the beginning of this book is he's tracked her down because he did want there to be something. He just didn't tell her that hey, I have some stuff going on and eventually we'll be together. He was being kind of a butt about it. So this one was okay. This one was the second one in a row where people were really resisting their mating bond, and that's not my favorite thing. I'm in Fated Mates for the Fated Mates. So this one was a 4-star, but I did continue the series, so we'll see more of that soon. Then I read Enthralled by Giana Darling. There was a really fun announcement this week. Giana Darling is going to be on the channel for one of the author hangouts on September 5th, which it is during Labor Day weekend, but I mean, I'm not traveling anywhere during that, and Giana's from Canada, so I'm really excited to have her. Tori from Novel Life and Jess from Peace Love Books are going to join us for that. They're also both Giana Darling fans. And Giana Darling, she just writes such amazing books. So I actually buddy read this book with Tori. That's why I asked her to be part of the hangout, because she's binging all of Giana's books. And this is the only duet I have left to read that I plan to read, because I don't plan to read the Evolution of Sin trilogy. I've read the first one and I didn't really enjoy myself. But this one starts off with Cosima, who is being sold into slavery by her father to pay off her debts. So she is being sold for a 5-year period to this guy named Alexander, who is training her to be his slave. And there are definitely more layers to this. It's not what it appears, but this was a tough book to get through. Both Tori and I, when we started it, I was like, whoa. And the thing I think that's helped me with this is that I read the anti-hero duet first, you know. I love Dante and Elena. And so I know where Xander and Cosima end up because I see them in that. And for me, that is helpful because when I was reading this, I have a friend who's not on Booktube who I messaged her and I was like, what's happening in this? I need you to tell me what's going on just a little bit because this is a lot. And she's like, yeah, I recently reread it and it's a lot, but in the second book is just so amazing. So I was like, okay. And we are reading Enamored soon. Like, I believe we're going to start it when Tori gets back from a trip that she's on. I was very intrigued by it. This was a 4-star for me. Master Slave is not something that I am comfortable reading. I love BDSM. I love BDSM as healing. I do not love forced, because to me, it's not BDSM if you're forced into it. When you're forced into a dynamic, it is slavery, like this. Now, again, there are many layers to this. I see where it's going. I am going to read the second one, and I have a feeling I'll love that one a lot more. But this was heavy to dive right into. And when there's kind of like starvation happening in some aspects and like really dehumanize to break someone down and build them up, I'm not a fan of that. But her writing is so beautiful, and I understand that I need to read the second one to fully understand the scope, and we will be reading that soon. So this was 4 stars. Then I read Darling All at Once by Pepper Lennox. This was just one of my Kindle-owned books that I put on my going to try to read. Every month I try to pick 5 of my owned Kindle books, so ones I got for free that I try to read in that month. This one was a surprise baby. It wasn't a secret baby. It was a surprise baby from a one-night stand. But I didn't like either of the characters. They were not inherently bad. They were boring. Our hero is a bit of a pothead, not even a bad boy, but just a bum. He's a bum. There wasn't any traits about him that I found attractive. I feel like this was a pretty, I felt like it was a pretty realistic setup of what it could be like if you had a one-night stand with someone that was sexy to you in the moment, but then you it kind of reminds me of Knocked Up. It really kind of reminded me of Knocked Up. That could be what inspired it even. Our heroine is actually gets asked by her younger sister to be her surrogate. So there is a little bit of infertility warning on behalf of the sister. We're not in that person's head, but just know that. And when she goes in to just do the test to see if she could be a surrogate is when she finds out that the one night stand she had got her pregnant. So I know it was supposed to be funny, and I was here for it to be funny, and then this series just wasn't, this book just wasn't as funny as I wanted it. So this was a 3-star for me. Then I read For the Love of English by A.M. Hargrove. This was a viewer recommendation. I really enjoyed this one. This one is a young single dad. This was actually put as a new adult because he's only 25, and our heroine, she's a teacher, and it's her first year teaching, so she's 22, and English is 6 and is going to be in her classroom, and the night of parent-teacher conferences, these two meet each other, And English, the daughter's name, was left on his doorstep when he was 19. And now the mother is trying to get custody of English, or partial custody of English. And so to help himself seem more stable, he ends up asking our heroine to be his wife, like to be in a marriage of convenience with him. This story just went all over the place. Like, really, I couldn't guess what they were going to do next. Our hero was pretty alpha. It was pretty like when they would have sex, it was really sexy. And I also loved seeing how much this teacher, cared about English, and how much she wanted to help, and that it really all was for the love of English, but then they really had a deep connection too. This was 4 stars just because it got a little ridiculous at the end. Like, it was just this crazy wild ending that had to do with the mom and some stuff that was going on, and I was like, I kind of wish that wasn't the way that it got worked out, because I wish that it had been more realistic of how you would get along with sharing custody of a child that, was an accident to you, but doesn't mean is unwanted. So that was 4 stars. Then I had a reread, which was Savage Tracker by Maggie Cole. I've been talking this book up on my channel since I read it back in May, and it's like finally here. I'm so happy it was here. I listened to the audio for this one as my reread because it's done by Kai Kennicott and Wen Ross, which is a real life married couple, and I'm kind of obsessed with them and the books that they narrate together. And yeah, this book, and I'll tell you particularly why I was having trouble with Enthralled, is that this is a book of forced master-slave scenario. Our heroine in this book, Selena, was in a forced master-slave relationship with her husband for 10 years. She was an immigrant to this country. She married him when she moved here. He kept her vulnerable and under his power for 10 years, and she's getting a divorce from him. So we've seen her in previous books in the series, and Obrecht happens to live in her building, and he's kind of asked by his family to watch out for Selena since they live in the same building, and he tops at BDSM clubs. So he's not so much a dominant or a master, but he is like a sir sometimes, and he'll do that in clubs. So he's not someone who wants to have a full-time dynamic with anyone or have a full-time relationship, but they recognize in each other that they could be a fit for each other. But Selena has so many unhealthy mindsets about what this relationship is and the power that she actually has, because she didn't have any with her husband. She was abused, she was raped, she was forced to do things, but she still has the desire to want it. And there's this really great quote on the back that I feel like hits in her head. And it's like, wanting anything resembling what I had should suffocate me. But with Obrecht, who is helping her come out, and with therapy, there's therapy in this book. Thank you, Maggie. It is beautiful, because you don't just get fixed from this. Just because you get the right partner who wants to do the right things doesn't mean he'll always do the right thing. But he kind of pushes her into having communication. And that communication they have, where he's constantly checking in, and he's like, we can push the boundaries of this, but I have to know that you'll stop me. And it's something that I love in romance. Like, it is my crack when there is BDSM used as healing, and the communication that you must have in a BDSM relationship gets introduced to someone and gives a woman, particularly a woman, their power back. Because in a dynamic, it's a power exchange. You as the bottom, or the submissive, or the slave even, if you're in a healthy master-slave relationship, you are choosing to secede your power. You're not powerless. And the top, the dominant, the master, they take the power because you've given it, and then they're supposed to take care of you. Even if you're doing some of the more extreme dynamics. I'm sorry this turned into a BDSM lesson, but the reason why I love this book, why this is a 6-star, why it's one of my favorite books of the year is because I feel like Maggie very carefully explains that. And it's something that isn't always explained in BDSM, because you don't always need to read one where you're getting a lesson in it. Sometimes you just want to read it because you know how it works. But sometimes it's explained like this, where it just hits me in the guts. And I'm like, this is what I want so badly. So that was a 6-star. Then I got to read The Bastard's Bargain by Katee Robards. I'm so excited I got to read this. This is the first book in the Scandalous Scions, which is a spin-off from the O'Malley series. So this series, I believe what she said, because I'm a Patreon of Katee's and I love her and I'm a stan. So take that with a grain of salt when I talk about her books, because I generally give her books 5 stars unless there's something that just really, really didn't work for me. Because I just love being in her world and how she like moves the story forward and everything. So I am a stan. I am biased. I do pay this woman to give me her books early. So just know that, okay? That's what on her Patreon happens. It's amazing. But I believe that she's planning to do kind of like 3 spin-off series from that one about the different kids. Like this one is the Romanoff O'Malleys. There's going to be the Sheridan O'Malleys. And then there's going to be like another one too that is like about the kids of those. So this quartet is going to be about the 4 daughters of Chiara and Dimitri. And that is the last book in the O'Malley series. So The Bastard's Bargain. Right. And then this one is The Bastard's Betrayal. And so this is about Rose, who's the oldest, and she's been in this kind of secret relationship, or she thinks it's a secret, with just a plain vanilla guy who's not a part of the mob. We call him a civilian, and they've been having mediocre sex, but hanging out and watching movies and loving it. And she's okay with everything that's happening. And then she gets called into Daddy's office, Daddy Dimitri, and told that the man she thinks is a civilian is actually Dante Fiducci. I'm not going to say his name right. And he has been dating her to kind of spy on her. So she goes to confront him, and the bitch pops him twice and says, hasta la vista, I'm going to go marry this guy that is a political alliance. So that all happens in the first 2 chapters. And then this turns into a captor-captive. And in reminiscent of favorite mafia kings of past, he kidnaps her and takes her to a remote cabin to get her to fall in love with him. And that's what this book is. Okay, that's the setup of this book. There's no spoilers in that. That's on the back of the book. And I gave this 5 stars. And I know some people aren't loving it as much as me, but I have a deep and abiding love for the O'Malleys. I just finished up this series last month, even though I started it almost 3 years ago. I took a pretty big break in there. And I had a great time. So there you go. That's what we're at. Then I read Layer by Layer by Kaylee Ryan. This was another viewer recommendation. I also had a great time with this one. This was a book that was very low angst. This is the first in a 5-book series about 5 brothers who own a business together. It was also kind of fun because the heroine is the admin / executive assistant for the brothers now, but she's mainly the assistant for the CEO, which is our hero. And I'm an admin assistant. So it was funny because there was a lot of stuff being explained about like what an admin does. And I was like, hey, that's me. And that's the role that I'm trying to find a job for right now. So that's what I do and what I'm trying to do. So that was kind of cool. But this was a very low angst. They meet each other on the plane where she's moving to this new town. Her previous job, she was harassed by her boss, and she finally quit. And so then she goes in, so they meet on the plane. He helps her get through her first plane ride ever, and he gives her his phone number. And then she moves to town, and she's going to call this guy, but she's moving in and all this stuff. And then she goes to her first day. And it's her boss, of course. And so he is a bit grumpy in the beginning because he thinks that she knew who he was. But there's no way that she would have known because, like, there was just no way for her to know who he was beforehand. And he quickly gets over that. So that's the thing is, like, he's a little bit grumpy in the beginning, but all of his brothers are amazing. It gave me a bit of, like, Miles Brothers vibes, right? So I'm always here for that. And, yeah, it was fun. It was a fun time. And yeah, I gave it 4 stars. And then I got to read Deviant Hacker by Maggie Cole. Maggie continues to spoil me. This is book 9 in the Mafia Wars. So, like, book 5 just came out. Book 9 doesn't come out till December 1st, okay? So, I can't say much about this one. I'll say kind of what the tropes are in this one. So this is the first one where the heroine is actually like young. She's 21 years old. Most all the heroines in this one, I believe, are in their 30s. So this is the youngest heroine we've had. And one of our older heroes. So like he's 44 and she's 21. And it's a bit of daddy kink in this one. Oh, it's so funny. On the live show with Maggie last weekend, she was on my channel, which the interview, you can go watch it now. I asked her if she had written daddy kink, because she has a lot of books already out that I just haven't had the time to dive into yet, because I'm so into Mafia Wars that I haven't tried the other ones. And she was like, the one coming, book number 9 is daddy kink. And I was like, oh my God. So I finally got to read that this week. And it was great. The other part of it is that, okay, so there's this young hacker. She's really gifted, and she is kind of messing things up for the O'Malleys. And I won't say how or why, because it's part of the grand, because she does have a grand plot line that's running through all the books that will culminate in the final book, which is Relentless Hunter, I think. And I really love this. I give this 5 stars. The beginning of this was tough, and so I didn't know where it was going. And I actually messaged Maggie, and I was like, oh my God, what's happening? What's happening? But our hero has an amazing grovel. So yeah, so this one is a bit of daddy kink. This is a captor-captive situation. This is a big age gap. And yeah, but the way that it has a turn, that it goes from being where I was like, okay, this hero is making some decisions that I cannot co-sign, but he has a really good grovel. So that's what I'll say about this one. And I love daddy kink, and I thought it was done really good in this one. So then I read What We May Be by Layla Reyne. So I had an e-arc for this one as well. I believe this one is Social Butterfly, or is it Valentine? I don't know who this one was from, but I had forgotten that I'd read another book by this author, because this was a new, I don't even know if it'll be a series, but this was a spin-off book or something. And this is more of a mystery. But doesn't it look sexy? Doesn't the cover look sexy? This is a menage, and it's a second chance poly relationship where one of the men in this MMF, he left because of reasons. And he had hoped that the people he left behind, that they would have a good relationship. So it's 10 years later. She's a police officer. He works for the FBI, and the other guy is a professor. And there's someone killing professors. So the FBI guy comes back to town to help with this crime, as well as to protect his ex-lover, and they're going to try their relationship again. So much of this was focused on police work and the mystery, and I just wanted to see how their dynamic was going to work. I wanted to see how it did, because the heroine is a bit of the dominant personality, not like dom as in like capital D, but like there is pegging in this book. She kind of orchestrates a lot of their intimate times, which I loved, because she wasn't like in charge, but sometimes they would be like, you tell us what to do because we want that. So there was this like rotating power dynamic kind of in different situations. But there was only 3 love scenes in this. One of them was almost a fade to black. And then the main chunk of the middle was the mystery, and then boom, it was wrapped up. One of those love scenes was even in the epilogue, and I just didn't see how they all worked their way back together. So I was really disappointed. And then when I went to rate this book, I realized that I'd read another one that was an MM, because this author, they write LGBTQ romances, and so that makes me happy. Like, they have an FF, they have menages, they have MM, they have all these different combinations, which is exciting, but there's too much mystery. Like, I want the sexy times, which I know I'm sure that there is a market for this, where people who don't necessarily want to see a poly relationship be super erotic, you know. Usually that is in the super erotic category, when the more bodies, the more sex, you know. But for me, I was just disappointed because my expectations were set wrong. So this was a 3-star for me. Then I read Dark Instincts by Suzanne Wright. As I said, this is book 4 in the series. This one is the heroine. We've seen her in previous ones, and she's very traumatized. She was attacked by humans. So this is a wolf. They're both wolf shifters. She was attacked by humans when she was young, and it was like videotaped. And actually, her brother actually went feral trying to protect her. who is the hero from the previous one, and he actually went to prison because he killed one of the humans who raped his sister, but because they were kids, he was put in jail. And so she's really traumatized, and our hero is really going for her. So I like this one more than the last two previous ones. This was a 4.5 star because they weren't as resistant to the mating bond. They just weren't sure whether they were mates or not. Whereas like in previous ones, they knew they were and they pushed it off. This couple, they weren't sure. So it like took a while for us to get there. And I was okay with that. I really enjoyed it. Then I read Broken Wing by Judith James. Oh my God. This was a viewer recommendation in my book form. And I'll tell you, I saw this cover and I was like, ooh. But the beautiful thing about the book form is I really try to read the book. But when I was going to read this, I was like, I'm going to read 50 pages in DNF, but I'll have tried it, right? I'll have tried it. This book blew my mind. This is a historical romance. My throat's getting sore, but I want to get through this. And our hero has been a prostitute for the last 8 years. He was forced into it. I think he's now probably 18 or 19. It's not clear how old he is. But for the last 5 years, he's protected this boy named Jamie, who was, who's lost his family. And when he was, I think he was only like 4 or 5 when he was taken, and he ended up in the hands of this brothel. And Gabriel, our hero, offered himself every time someone wanted to rape Jamie, he would put himself in front. So for 5 years, protecting Jamie is like what kept him going. Now at the beginning of this book, so we don't have to see all of that. We do see the trauma of it sometimes. So there are triggers for that. But for the most part, it's all pretty tastefully done. Like we're starting the book with Jamie's brother and sister, who he doesn't even remember because he was taken when he was so little. His brother and sister, Sarah and Ross, have finally found him, and they're going to bring him home. And Jamie won't leave without Gabriel because Gabriel is his big brother now. And so Ross pays off the madam an extraordinary amount of money to bring Gabriel to, because Gabriel makes her a lot of money. And so Gabriel is this broken, jaded boy. You know, like inside he's still a boy, even though he knows all these worldly things. He despises his body. There is trigger warnings for self-harm. He cuts his, he scars himself. I don't know how to say it, because he's not like slitting his wrist, but he's basically cutting himself. He despises himself. But Ross, number 1, pays for him to come. Number 2, he offers to pay him £10,000 if he will stay and be Jamie's companion for a year. And of course, Gabriel assumes that Ross is going to want to fuck him and that Sarah is going to want to use him because he sees how she's looking at him. Well, she's looking at him because he's fucking beautiful and she's in awe. He's very prickly. He's a very prickly man. He has so many scars. But watching Sarah and Gabriel fall in love, it's some of the most beautiful stuff that I've read. Like, oh my gosh. This historical is not going to be for everybody, okay? This is an epic tale, okay? This book seems like it follows Sarah and Gabriel, but this book is really about Gabriel. It's about the pit of despair. It's about hope. It's about despair again. It's about forgiveness. It's about hope. It's about not even redemption, because he doesn't need it, but like rebirth. And like, you are not what you were forced to do. Sarah says that to Gabriel over and over, and it's amazing. There's a little bit of triggering words in this. So Sarah is actually half Romani. Her and Rafe have the same dad, so they're half siblings. When his mother died, their father married Rafe's mother, who was Romani woman. And so she's called the Gypsy Countess. And so that word is put around. And it's very clear that when she's called that, it's a slur though. And so when she like refers to herself, she'll say Rom or things like that. But I just want to let you know that this was written, I think, in like 2009. So some of that's in here, but it's not a main part of the story. And like, the story is so beautiful that also this takes place in like the 1700s too. So just know that, like, there is some history throughout this of, like, stuff that's happening with Napoleon, and then there's, like, pirating on the high seas, and there's being taken into slavery in this part. So there are things that are, like, triggering to this. But this story, I was 15 pages in, and I was like, this book is amazing. It didn't make it to a 6-star for me just because of a little bit of the third act stuff, and then things, like, wrapped up really quickly. Because there was a point of it where I was like, this is going to be a 6-star for sure. But it is a solid 5-star. Solid 5-star. I highly recommend. Thank you so much. I believe Christy J is the person who recommended this to me. I'm just pulling it off my head. Holy shit. Thank you for this recommendation. I put it on Tiffany's radar immediately. It was so wonderful. Okay. Then I read Scandalous Passions by Nicola Davidson. This was also on my list of need to read it because it's been on my forever. This was one I picked up when I was picking up Menages. This is an FFM. It's set in the Tudor times. We have a woman who's been raised as a nun to keep her pure. We have a widow, and we have a castle guard. The widow ends up being kind of the dom of the other two. And this book was awkward. It was awkwardly written. I can tell this is an older one from Nicola Davidson. I really love a lot of her stuff. She writes a lot of queer romance, historical, very sexy, a lot of female doms she'll write, which I enjoy. But this one was like super cringe. Like, it was I don't know another way to explain it. Like, it was awkward. The sexual encounters were awkward as hell. And the hero was too much of a pushover. Like, I don't like reading a hero that's a submissive and doesn't do anything. Because you can be submissive in the bedroom and still be a manly man outside of it. And I just didn't buy that this castle guard would be such a pushover all the time. I'm just saying. Some of the scenes were hot, but Then yesterday I reread Devil in Disguise. I listened to the audiobook and I marked up all my favorite parts of this. You already know this is 6-star. This is probably my favorite book I've read this year. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see how the year shakes out. But I fucking loved it. It was beautiful. We've talked about this enough. The live show for this will be the 3rd Thursday in August. So you'll want to join the Rake Appreciation Society for this one. And then the last book I read, which I also binged yesterday, was One Summer by Karen Robards. This is a recommendation from Ash. I believe it was from you, Ash, who has been recommending this in my buddy read book for the past like 4 months, and it's just never gotten picked. And I really wanted to give it a try once I read the premise of this book. So this book is about Johnny Harris, who did 10 years in a federal prison for murder. And now he's on parole, and he needs a job to be able to be on parole. And so Rachel Grant, who used to be his teacher, gives him a job at her family hardware store. And so this sullen boy that she remembers is like this god now. Like, seriously, he is worked out in prison. He still drives a motorcycle. He's sexy as hell, and he has a thing for her. And this book was written in 1993. It is dated. There are terms that are dated and a little bit racist, but in general, it holds up just because it's set in a small town that's really full of prejudice, and we've read it before. Something I was telling Crystal about, I left her this long message today, is that it's interesting to me to see what was a contemporary novel in 1993 compared to what's a contemporary novel now. And I'm not going to lie, besides there being some terms that don't age well, some things that don't sit right with us now because we have evolved in that way, this book doesn't assume that you're dumb. And I hate to say that, but as someone who lately, like, traditionally published contemporaries make me feel like I'm dumb with the stuff they're trying to explain. And I don't want to go more into that than that because it will set me off a little bit. But I really loved this. There's a bit of a mystery in it because the person who actually killed the woman when he was put in prison is back again. Seems to have a vendetta against him, and it was pretty interesting. I gave this 4 stars. I listened to the audiobook, and I actually loved it. It was pretty sexy too. So this was an age gap because he's like 28 and she's 34. And it's cool because he admits, he's like, I used to jack off to you when I was a teen all the time. I was obsessed with you. But yeah, this was really interesting. Ash, I'm glad I finally read it. I did it. So there you go. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this. Thank you so much to the new channel members. It means so much to me. Make sure you reach out to me if you don't have your perks yet. I will make sure that you get them in the Discord and stuff like that. Thank you so much for watching. I put up new videos 3 to 4 times a week, and you can watch some more of them right now. Bye.